Hey everyone, Cosmos here from Dolly Games. In this video we're going to be going over the I forgot to collect these. Going over the new Dragonchant skills from Wartune patch 8.6. So I'm just gonna pick these up while I'm here, because the reset is coming up soon and I still have a few to take. But anyways, so I want to go over the Dragonchant skills because as you know, the whole system has been revamped, and also players have been asking me about my opinion on them, and I want to go over each skill and explain, or we'll look together at what the choices are, and I will argue or try to convince on which we should pick based on the choices that we have. So the old system has been completely taken out, and it's been replaced with this new system. And so we have to pick we have to assign skill points. This is here we have skill point 60, and those we have to assign. And there are also sets that you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you're for free players, you basically just have the first set available, and if you want to unlock more sets, you have to you can do it with unbound balance. Bound balance don't work. If memory serves me right, second set is 1,000, third set is 1,500, so maybe it's plus 500 for each following one. But I'm just gonna go over just having one over here, and I still haven't assigned my skills. I've been able to do everything that I needed so far until this video. And the first thing I want to say is, before going into the skills, that if you were to choose one choice in everything, watch the points. So the first one costs 1, the second one costs 2, and the next one costs 3, and so forth. But basically, if you pick everything, well, of course you cannot select both trees from the same skill, but if you do select every skill, it covers exactly the 60 points. So we don't have to choose which skills we have to take. We kind of will have all the skills, but we do have to choose which tree, like part A or part B, that we will choose from both of those options. So we are going to go over the what they do, and another helpful tip in terms of the way it's organized. I also agree with some players that it's you know, a really long list now. It's could have been made in a better way and so forth. I totally agree, but I don't want to go into criticism. There are a lot of things that can be said about the new system. In this video I'm just gonna discuss the skills. So for the better or for the worse, this is the system now. It might change in the future, I don't know, but let's go over the skills. So another tip I wanted to give is that well, the obvious is you have the active skills, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on top, and then you have the passive skills below. So that's one. But the other thing is the countdown or the cooldown, sorry, of the skills is growing. So this one is 2 seconds cooldown, this one is 2 seconds cooldown, and then it grows to 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and 25 seconds on this one. So roughly 30 seconds. So 2 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and yeah, that's it. So now let's go over into the effects, and it might be actually easier if we go from the bottom up. So we're going to be talking about the active skills right now, because those are the ones which are important, which we are using regularly. Passives are also, of course, very nice, but not to make too long video, we'll first go over the active ones and then see how long that takes. Alright, the reason I say we might be able to go, it might be easier to go from bottom up, is because the choice is a little bit easier. I actually find it easier to choose the bottom one, the bigger cooldown skills and the lower cooldown skills. I'll explain a little bit why. So the main difference between the two trees, so the A and the B, or let's say one of the main difference is the effect of the flame. So now in the new system, when you use a skill, it puts what is called a flame on the enemy, and the enemy accumulates those flames. So you hit him once, for example, this skill where my mouse is right now, is giving one flame. So it says deals damage to random enemies, gains rage, gains combo point, and gives one flame, so on the enemy. And then once the enemy has 5 flames, so if you use this skill 5 times, then there's going to be what is called an explosion, or it explodes, which I think it happens on the 6th attack, if I'm not wrong. And then that will deal 300% damage, so a big damage output. And that happens on the first, or path A, or part 1, whatever the name you want to use, of the tree. But the part 2 or part B is having a different effect when the flames are accumulated. So and that's the same for all 5 active skills. That's why it doesn't matter which one I hold mouse over. So the part A is doing the explosion, and then part B is doing this random effect. So explodes when target has 5 flames. So this is the part B, so it doesn't actually explode. It applies either one of the effects, so cursing with one of the following debuffs. Attacks all units for 2 to 4 turns, so that's chaos effect. Forgets 3 skills for 2 to 4 turns, so that's amnesia effect. Or reduces awakening level 1500 to 1400. So that's preventing the enemy to enter the sylph mode, or to get into sylph. And it's random, so you don't know which one is gonna work. So but the difference is this one is predictable. It basically has a damage output, whereas this one is less predictable, but it has very dangerous effects, because if the chaos is activated, then he might hit himself or his friend or his friends. And if amnesia is activated, then he won't have the use of his skills, and if the awakening point is activated, then he won't be able to get into sylph mode. You get into the sylph mode, so you might actually dish out more damage, and so forth. So that difference is exactly the same for all the skills of part A and part B. So of course, apart from the differences of what the skills do, that main difference in collection of 5 flames is the same for all the 5 skills. So that means that if you are mostly going to do player versus environment, I think that's the intention, is that you would pick part A of the tree, or the top part of the tree, and if you're doing player versus player, you would pick part 2 of the tree. But some would argue that you might even choose to use part 2 of the tree, even if you're not fighting a player, because of the other effects that the skills are doing. And the part 1 of the tree is less versatile, because it is let's say targeting usually one enemy, while part 2 of the trees are more versatile, targeting multiple enemies and having these interesting effects. So I would say, as a default position, so before going into the skills, let's say that our preference generally would be to select the second part, or part B of whatever tree. So if we're going to select the top part, then we have to convince or make an argument why that's indeed better than the bottom part. So that's where I would say you would start as your default position by having a preference towards the bottom. So with that said, let's go into each of the skills, starting from the bottom one, because I think it's much easier to choose going from the bottom. So this one is the Nightmare on the top side, Nightmare, Nightmare, Nightmare C, and then on the bottom we have Magic Eraser, Magic Eraser, and Magic Eraser C. So because we are going by the points as I showed earlier in this video, because we will be able to reach the top, there is no reason for us to read the first two skills, because we will always have the, let's say, the best version of the skills. So we're just gonna look at these two, and we're also not gonna look at the basic one which you start with, because that's the weakest form. And then once you get into whichever path, then you have these two final forms. So all we have to do is basically choose between these two for every skill. So let's look at what they do. So this is the fifth skill, so in a way most powerful one, because it has a cooldown of the base has 25, but the final versions have 30 seconds. So, and those are the ones which are more important. So 30-second cooldown. They are the largest rage consumption ones, taking 80 rage, and they also are the largest combo points consumption, so taking 4 combo points to use the skill. Now, a quick side note before reading the skills, there are now also the passives which can eat up the rage. Let's see if I can quickly find it. I guess it's the third one it was. Yeah, so receive rage. So this is the receiving one, and there's one there, for example, this one. Each action earns 10 points of rage, and 20% causes one random enemy to lose 30 rage. So if, for example, you're fighting an enemy which is using various ways to steal your rage, then it's going to be difficult to use the fifth skill. There's just a side point. You're still going to have to choose it because you have enough points to choose a fifth skill, but just consider that you might not always be able to cast it. But okay, so now that we know that this is the most expensive skill, for both versions the costs are the same, so that does not differ. The top part is focused on damage, so it is single target attack, deals 450% damage to the enemy with the lowest HP, and we'll also make it difficult and say that let's say we're going to be fighting 1 versus 1 to compare. No, let's not say that, because the bottom one will actually hit multiple enemies. So okay, let's go. So it's hitting one single target with a very strong 450% damage, and it's causing that target to gain 4 flames, so almost enough for the explosion. The explosion effect is the same, so I'm not gonna read that for every skill. I already went over that. So this one is just what we see is 1 versus 1, one strong hit. Now the second version, or the bottom version, it is twice, roughly speaking, twice weaker in terms of the damage it's doing, but it has all kinds of really cool things with it. So it does 230% damage, so compared to the other, which was 450. But this skill, it hits all the enemies, so no matter how many you're fighting, it hits all. So this is a true AoE, which is so AoE, area of effect, so true AoE skill, which is very valuable generally speaking. It gives 2 flames, not 4 flames, so it gives less flames, so that's a bad thing. But it increases the damage received by all enemies by 20% for 3, and this is on all enemies. So it's, if you're fighting like a group of 4, a group of 6, all of them are gonna get a debuff of 20% receiving 20% more damage for 3 turns. That's pretty awesome, especially in team fights. If you think, for example, Arena 4v4, if one player applies this, then the entire enemy team is going to be receiving 20% more damage. But if that's already awesome. But if that's not enough, it also restores 30% health for the entire team. So really powerful heal. 30% is a massive amount. I mean, on my character right now, for example, is almost 1 point. What is it? My eyes are not as good as they were before. So roughly 14 mil. So 10% is 1.4 mil. So let's say, roughly speaking, what is it? And 4, something like 4.5 million heal is massive. So yeah, it's kind of a crazy amount of heal. And of course there are other powerful heals in the game as well, but this would come on top on whatever other heals you may have. I'm just curious actually to compare on the Titans, because I don't remember from the top of my head. Here, sorry, the Moon Guardian, which is a very strong shield, it is 40% of max HP. So it's not as strong as the Moon Guardian, but Moon Guardian is also a shield, while this one is actually a heal. And sometimes a heal is better. A heal is better, of course, if your health is damaged, but a shield is better if you're at full health. So okay, we're not gonna go into heal and shield discussion, but for this 5th skill, so it does damage, it hits everybody that there is. The bad thing is that it applies half the amount of flames compared to this one, but it increases the damage that the enemy receives, all the enemies receive, by 20% for 3 turns, and restores 30% health for the team. So I think that's really powerful, and between these two, I would have a preference on selecting the Magic Eraser versus the Nightmare. Now the Nightmare will of course shine in a situation where it's a pure 1v1 battle, such as a PvE boss fight, so you against the boss. But even then you have to consider that this one does the 450% damage, which is significantly more than this one. But you have to consider all the effects that this one is doing. This will increase also the next 3 attacks with 20% more damage. It will help you survive. So even in a boss fight, so not a player versus player, but a player versus environment fight, even then there's argument to be made that this skill is better. So but you cannot ignore the strength of 450% damage and 4 flames. Don't forget the 4 flames, because once the 5 flames, this one does an explosion, whereas this one applies an effect. And that simply means, if we simplify the situation, is that this one will result in much more damage than this one, because you have a 300% damage explosion once there are 5 flames on top of such a high damage number figure. So alright, the argument for using the top part is if you're doing a boss fight. It might result in significantly more damage. The argument for the bottom part is it's much more versatile, and it can work both in PvP and PvE. So for especially those players who don't have balance to unlock additional sets, I would argue that the Magic Eraser would do better. It would be a better choice here. Alright, going to skill number 4. So we have the Soul Eater line, which is Soul Eater, Soul Eater, Soul Eater changed. I don't know, the names are weird. Dragon Dance, and Dragon Dance C. So we have the Soul Eater. It is a 30-second cooldown, like skill number 5, 30 rage, 3 combo points. So combo point consumption is still quite expensive, but the rage is already quite easy. And that is the same for both. What is different is the Soul Eater will be hitting the back row, whereas the Dragon Dance is going to be hitting 3 to 4 targets. So there could be only one enemy in the back row, in which case this would be hitting one. Whereas the Dragon Dance is more versatile. It doesn't matter where in the formation the enemies are standing, it would hit 3 to 4 of them. So it's not a true AoE, but 3 to 4 is already quite a lot. So it's almost a true AoE. Now the damage difference, this one is 350%, this one is 250%. So again, the bottom one is less damage, but remember, it's hitting more targets. Then this one is applying 1 flame, and this one is applying 1 flame as well, but it has this additional effect, which is causing the enemy to gain 2 flames after each action for 2 turns. So it becomes 1 plus 2 plus 2, in total 5 flames, with the difference that it is not applied immediately, but over duration of total current turn plus 2 turns, so 3 turns. Alright. So, but still, it is 1 flame versus 5 flames. That's a massive difference in flames, I think. So then the next continues to talk about here the 5 flame effect, but here there is an additional effect. It guarantees crit hit next action, increasing crit damage by 50 to 200%. So not only it is guaranteeing a crit, it's also increasing the crit damage. It's guaranteeing the crit for the next action. So for example, you could do number 4, a Soul Eater, preparing to hit it really hard with the Nightmare, and if you do it even better, making sure that to do this when the enemy already has 4 flames, then the Soul Eater would make it 5 flames, and then the next one, if you do Nightmare, 450% damage and an explosion of 300%. That can be and it would be guaranteed crit with an increased crit damage of 50 to 200%. That can be some insane amount of damage. So that's the argument for the top line. And again, that would be more applicable to a 1 versus 1 situation, because if it's hitting the wrong targets, because this one Nightmare is doing hitting a single target with the lowest HP, and this one is hitting the back row. So if there are 2 targets, one in the back row with a lot of HP, and let's say a boss, and in front of a boss is standing a mob, so this one would hit the boss, and this one would hit the mob, and that wouldn't work out. So that's why the only way to make this predictable is if there's only one enemy, and that would be a boss fight. So again, for a boss fight, you could make a combination of the 2 top rows of skill number 4 and skill number 5. But again, if you only can choose one set, Dragon Dance is much more versatile, because not only it puts a ton of flames on the target, which will put more various effects such as chaos, amnesia, and so forth, but it also it's almost an AoE, which is quite nice. So it's more versatile, but damage wise, still the Soul Eater wins. Alright, then going into Fatal Chain Reaction, this is the 10-second cooldown. So we have the top line Fatal Chain Reaction C, and the bottom line Frosting Feast Change. So the top line is dealing 500% damage to a random enemy, so one random enemy, and putting 3 flames. So although it's a 10-second cooldown skill, it is almost as powerful, or actually more, you could argue more powerful than the Nightmare, which is a 30 seconds skill, because the Nightmare is 450% damage, while the Fatal Chain Reaction is 500%. The only thing is, it's putting one less flame on the enemy versus the 4 flames of the Nightmare, but I think for the price of the cooldown, this is better. So another combination you could think of is combining the Soul Eater with the Fatal Chain instead of taking the Soul Eater with the Nightmare, which will allow you to have the Magic Eraser as your true AoE. Alright, and the second bit, so that was all, and this one is combo points 3 consumption and as well rage consumption 80. So then the bottom line, Frosting Feast, is also a true AoE, also costing 80 rage and 3 combo, kind of like the Magic Eraser, but it's different, of course, from the Magic Eraser. So this one is doing 350% damage. We're going to compare it both to this and the Magic Eraser. So it is 150% less than the top line, and but it is more than 100% more than the Magic Eraser. So this is an AoE which does much more damage. It also gives 2 flames. So Magic Eraser is also giving 2 flames, and while the Fatal Chain Reaction was giving 3 flames, and reduces damage received by all allies by 20%. So it has this defensive aspect to it. So so you could summarize it by a very strong AoE, because 350% is very good percentage, very high percentage for an AoE attack. So a very strong AoE, okay flames, and putting a defensive damage reduction on your team. Whereas the Magic Eraser was doing a weaker damage AoE, same flames, but increasing damage on the enemies. So both, and also of course this 30% really good healing. Now the healing can be seen as the same thing as reducing damage. So if somebody hits you for 100 damage, or if you heal 100 points, you could say it's the same thing. So the Magic Eraser has in fact all the aspects that the Frosting Feast has, but Frosting Feast it has a cooldown of 10 seconds, while the Magic Eraser is a cooldown of 30 seconds. So that's also a choice. So if you want a stronger AoE, and if you choose the Frosting Feast, you're then not taking the Fatal Chain Reaction. Then you will, if you want to have that Soul Eater combination, then you'll have to pick the Nightmare here, giving up the Magic Eraser. Alright, but between the two, if we look at these two, 10 seconds, it's not a let's say very slow cooldown, but it is a cooldown nevertheless. However, in a lag battle, it's almost you might actually be able to use it every turn. So yeah, it's you could say there is 10-second cooldown is no cooldown, depending on the battle that you're having. That's also to take into consideration. So on a battle where you could cast this every turn, you know, this is very powerful. Of course, you need to get those combo points and the rage points, but that can be gathered with the first skill as well as the passive. So you might not be able to cast it every turn, but almost every turn. Alright. Then on the other aspect is this one is single target again. So if you hit somebody, if you're fighting 4 enemies, either 4 players or 4 mobs or 4 mini bosses, or a boss and 3 mobs, you might hit really strong a mob instead of it landing on a boss, because it's a random single target, and that way you would do an overkill and it would be a waste of the damage, whereas this one will always hit everybody. So in that sense, this one is more versatile. But again, remember that the top line has this damage explosion, whereas the bottom line has the random effect. So for example, if you would reduce awakening points on a boss, well, that would be a complete waste of the flames, whereas the top line is the damage is always useful, let's say it like that. Alright, next we have Death Linger with Lingering Death changed on top and Blizzard on the bottom. So this one is a 2-second cooldown. This you can cast every turn. 10 rage consumption, so very cheap. 1 combo point consumption, also very cheap. 240% damage to 1 enemy and 2 flames. Compared to that, we have the bottom line Blizzard, hitting 2 to 3 enemies instead of 1 enemy, but this one does less damage and gives half the flame, so 1 flame. So between these two, so these two are kind of your cheap attack skill, and for the cheap attack skill you would, I think, only choose Blizzard if you did not take any of the AoEs, because the Blizzard can hit 2 to 3 enemies. So if for whatever reason you did not choose Frosting Feast, and you did not choose Magic Eraser, and you did not choose Dragon Dance, then you might want to take Blizzard. But if you have other AoEs, I think it's not interesting to take the Blizzard, because you would already have the AoEs in case you need to use, in case you're fighting more than 1 enemy. And for skill number 2, I would argue that in any situation, because most likely you will pick some of these AoEs because they're really tasty, if you have another AoE, I would say almost 100% of cases I would recommend the Lingering Death, simply because it is a very cheap way that you can apply flames very fast on the target. So to give you an example, because it is applying 2 flames, so say you're fighting a boss and you want to make a strong explosion on that boss, you could do 2 times Lingering Death, which would put 2 flames plus 2 flames, so you do that makes it 4 flames in total, and you would do this very cheaply because it would just cost you 2 times 10 rage and 2 combo points in total, so 1 for every casting. So at that point the boss would have 4 points, and then if you would put Soul Eater at that point, making the boss have 5 flames and guaranteeing the next attack to be critical and a stronger critical, then you could use either the Fatal Chain Reaction or the Nightmare to in the next round to hit the boss extremely hard. So that's why I kind of like very much the Lingering Death compared to the Blizzard. Now the argument for the Blizzard is, if you only took one other AoE, for example the 30-second one, or you took only one AoE, the 10-second one, you might say, okay, I'm fighting often with multiple enemies, and then I want to spam Blizzard to apply flames on multiple enemies and also hit multiple enemies extremely cheaply with 10 rage. That would be the argument for Blizzard, but based on what I discussed, I think in most cases, or the majority of cases, Lingering Death would be a better choice. Now we're back to the beginning, to skill number 1, the Impaling Ice. So we have on top the Impaling Ice C, and we have on the bottom Misfortune C. So the top one strangely, because mostly all the top ones are hitting one enemy. So we have the Nightmare hitting a single target. We have the Soul Eater hitting a back row, which is one. It is a row, but yeah, often it can be one target. So then we have the Fatal Chain Reaction hitting a random single target. We have the Lingering Death hitting a random single target. But the Impaling Eyes is strangely a random 1 to 2 targets, so it might hit 2 targets. So it's not a 1v1 alone. Now these skill number 1 and skill number 2 are both 2-second cooldown skills, meaning you can cast them every turn. So that's important to remember, because you can't use both at the same time. So if you already have something that you can cast every turn, what's the difference? And the difference is that the skill number 1 is where you build rage and combo points, whereas all the other skills is where you use the rage and combo points. Although skill number 2 is extremely cheap, so it's very easy to use it. Now for the Impaling Eyes, we have the hitting on 1 to 2 targets, cooldown 2 seconds means every turn, and then it does 180% damage, giving 20 rage and 2 combo points, also giving 1 flame. So 20 rage, 2 combo points is enough to cast the Death Linger twice. So that's that. So very simple attack on top, Impaling Eyes, to gain rage combo points, a little bit of damage. So 180 is not bad, but it's not good either, and an unpredictable amount of enemies hit, so between 1 and 2. So as you cannot predict it, you should assume 1 target. If it happens 2 targets, consider it a bonus. But expect 1 when you're strategizing. Alright, and then we have the Misfortune. It has the same damage figure. It also has the same 1 to 2 targets, so that's not different. It also has the same gain 20 rage and 2 combo points, giving target 1 flame. So basically exactly the same. So the difference between these two are only the explosion effect. Now with the explosion effect, it's only for skill number 1, it's only important if you lose track on how many flames, who has how many flames, because if you're fighting 1 target, you could I suppose, especially if it's a boss, you could count how many flames you've put on the boss, and you won't accidentally trigger the explosion effect with skill number 1, because with skill number 1, if you have Impaling Eyes and you accidentally trigger the 5 flame explosion, it's going to be very small damage. I mean, it's still going to be a decent amount, decent damage because of the 300% of the explosion, but 300% using 180% as a base is completely different than 300% using 500% as a base. So huge difference. So you definitely don't want to trigger Impaling Eyes 5 flame explosion with Impaling Eyes. Now with Misfortune, I guess it's okay to trigger it, because the effect is absolutely the same for all the skills, because it doesn't matter it's not the effect is not working on the damage figure. It is simply applying Chaos Amnesia or reduction of awakening points, and all 5 skill do that. So there is absolutely no difference if you trigger the 5 flame explosion with Magic Eraser, with Dragon Dance, or with something very basic as Misfortune. So in that regard, it's safer to use Misfortune, because if you mess up, at least something good can come out of it. Now the most important is that they both do the same thing, the same 180% damage, the same 1 to 2 targets, the same gain 20 rage, 2 combo points, and the same giving 1 flame. So the basic build between those two is no different at all. And because you don't want the 300% flame explosion on the impaling eyes in any case, well, I guess only in emergencies or something, then I would argue, or if you planned it badly, if you have the 5 flames and you end up in a situation where you don't have rage, your rage is 0. Well, if your rage is 0, you can't even cast Lingering Death. So then you might want to do the explosion with the impaling eyes. But I would argue that that's because of poor strategy or poor battle or combat planning. So I wouldn't select skills based on that argument. So in that case, I would argue for the Misfortune, because it's not based on the damage figure. So the video is already quite long. We're over 40 minutes. So as I expected, I'm not going to go over the passives here. Or maybe we can look at it very quickly. Yeah, we'll look at it very quickly. But before looking at it very quickly, let's summarize what we have. I would argue that Misfortune is the best choice here, based on what I explained. Then we already talked about the Lingering Death, the fact that it can add 2 flames, and with just 2 attacks, costing a very cheap amount of 20 rage in total and 2 combo points in total, you can build up in 2 rounds 4 flames, which is almost enough for an explosion. The Blizzard, as I also argued, is only interesting, I think, if you don't take any of the other AoE skills. So I'll assume we'll take some AoE skills. In that case, it would be bottom one here, top one here, and then we have skill number 3, which was the very strong, and actually the highest strength attack is skill number 3 and not skill number 5. And I'm not sure if that means that they will fix it, or if the text description is wrong. I don't know. Usually number 5 should be the most powerful. In this case, number 3 is the most powerful, which is a little bit weird, but okay. So here you have to make a choice if you're gonna go for that combination with Soul Eater, because I think the combination of the Soul Eater is sort of that's where you have to kind of go from. Are you gonna take the Soul Eater or not? Because that's a kind of a building block. You know, because if you don't take the Soul Eater, I think it's a little bit the game changes. So that's something you have to decide for yourself. But if you don't take Soul Eater, you do benefit from an almost AoE attack, which can put almost 5 flames on the target, but of course over 3 turns total. So it's 1 + 2 + 2. And because it hits 3 to 4 targets, you can potentially put a ton of flames on a ton of targets. So the Dragon Dance is also interesting in the sense of applying the flames. So although it will not guarantee a crit like the Soul Eater guarantees, and it will not guarantee an increased crit damage like the Soul Eater guarantees, by putting all those flames, you could do you could quickly activate any of the AoE skills. For example, multiple enemies. So imagine putting multiple chaos, multiple amnesia. You know, that can be quite powerful. So I would say before you choose skill number 3 and skill number 5, first choose skill number 4 if you're gonna go for the Soul Eater, or if you're gonna go for the Dragon Dance. Now let's take the scenario that you took the Soul Eater. If you take the Soul Eater, you're basically demanding you're basically requiring to have another strong single attacker, and that is the Fatal Chain. The problem is the Soul Eater will only put one flame, so you would have to do 2 times Lingering Death, then 1 Soul Eater, but before that you need to build up your rage and combo points, because the Lingering Death 2 times is going to be 20 rage, 2 combo points. Then the Soul Eater is gonna be 30 rage, so you're at 50 rage, but also 3 combo points, and that's already 5 combo points. So that's gonna be difficult. Unless you build up the rage and the flames with Misfortune, but the Fatal Chain Reaction is also using 3 combo points, and 3 plus 3, that's 6 combo points. So that's gonna be difficult. So. But okay, that aside, because you also have benefits from the passives and other such. If you're gonna go for the Soul Eater, you want to hit somebody really hard, like Fatal Chain Reaction or Nightmare. At the worst case, you can hit him with Lingering Death. It's half the amount, so not instead of 500% damage, it's 240% damage, but you might not have the rage or the combo points to cast the strong one. In that case, you could hit him with this one, which is still gonna be a strong damage because the flame effect is 300%. So that's that. And if you take the where's number 4? And if you take the Dragon Dance, then you're not tied up with the Soul Eater, you're more free, and you would use Dragon Dance to build up the flames, as it takes in your current turn plus 2 turns, so total 3 turns for the flames to build up. You could use those turns to build up rage with Misfortune, for example, and once the flames are at 5, you could hit them with an AoE, hitting multiple, activating Flame Explosion on multiple targets. So either the Magic Eraser or the Frost Feast, which is also a true AoE. And you would choose which one you would do based on if you want to have this 20% damage reduction, or if you need to heal up. So let's say if you're beat up, it's better to heal up. So yeah, that would be the choice. So that's in terms of skills. Let's do a quick look over on the passes, but I'll do it quickly because it's become a really long video now. So we have the dragon spell. We have on top increase HP by 20%, attack by 20%, defense by 20% when the enemy is a monster. So this becomes completely useless in a PvP, but very useful against monsters. Armour Piercers reduces all enemy units HP, attack, defense by 20% when enemy is human. So this is the opposite. The choice between these two is simply coming from if you do a lot of PvP or not. So I would probably pick the dragon spell because I don't have time to do much PvP. So I would probably go for that. People who do a lot of battlegrounds, arenas and so forth, you probably want to pick Armour Piercer. Then we have the passive Tenacity. We have the adds flame skill to each use, and 25% chance when player has 5+ flames to restore HP. So this will benefit the builds which are, for example, the people who pick the people who pick the Dragon Dance. The Dragon Dance giving 5 flames, but of course over time, but still 5 flames. Would benefit from Tenacity's top one because it has a 10% HP heal. So when player has 5+ flames to restore 10% HP, adds flame skill to each use is also very nice. And of course the heal is 25% chance, not always. Then the bottom one is adds flame skill to each use and 25% chance when players 5+ flame to increase crit by 20%. And this is not crit damage. I would actually prefer crit damage, not crit, because if you have sufficient amount of crit, adding more crit doesn't help. So between those two, I would think of Tenacity C rather than Divine Peace C. Then we have the Undead. Undead receive 10 rage when being attacked and 5 rage when attacking. So this is useful when you're fighting one versus many enemies, because many enemies hitting you will give you a ton of rage. And the bottom one is each action earns 10 points of rage, and 20% causes one random enemy to lose 30 rage. And you could think of this as the opposite, whereas this one is one versus many enemies. This one is more when you don't have many enemies. It's more one versus one. So again, in any situation where you have multiple enemies, which PvP, for example, Arena 4v4 is the case, this will give you a ton more rage. This one, the 20% causes one random enemy to lose 30 rage. In a battle where you have multiple enemies, you have no idea who it's gonna go on, so it's very unpredictable and it might be useless. So the choice here is between multiple enemy battles or one versus one battle. And of course I'm talking about PvP here because monsters and bosses don't have rage to lose. So it sort of looks like the Undead C would be better, because each action earns 10 points of rage, and this one is you adding 5 rage, but it's also adding 10 rage. So in fact you're having 15 rage even in a 1v1. So this one is faster rage, this one is a bit less rage, but the chance of making the enemy lose 30 rage. So in areas for example where it's a 1 versus 1 PvP, the threat C is better, clearly. So that's that. And then we have Icicle C and Shadow Arrow. Icicle C restores 1 attack point each action and 50% chance to earn bonus 2 attack points. And the Shadow Arrow restores 1 attack point each action, so that part is the same. And here's 15% chance, here's 20% chance to cause 1 to 4 enemies to gain 1 flame. So yeah, this is different situations, different one is better. So I can't say that one is clearly better. 15% chance is also not very high, so it's less than 1 in 5. So this one is 20, it's 1 in 5, and this one is even less than that. 20% one get flame. Yeah, it's a bit harder to pick from those two. Then we have the Lashing Out C and Armor Breaker C. Lashing Out C, 20% chance upon each action to increase party's damage by 20%. By the way, another way of looking at 20% chance is you take whatever the benefit is giving and you divide by 5 and say that it's every turn, because that's what it basically is. 20% chance means once every 5 turns, or you could say divide it by 5 and consider it per turn. So in this case, it's increasing party damage by 20% for 3 turns. You could say it's 100% chance, and you divide the 20% gain by 5, and you have 4%. So you could say it's 100% chance to increase 4% damage every turn. So that kind of another way of looking at it might help to compare. So then we have the Armor Breaker C. Each action has 20% chance to dispel buffs, all buffs from one enemy. So again, you could say this has 100% chance to oh no, you can't say 100% for this, because it's dispel all buff, it's not 100%. Okay, So the chance the same. The difference is this one will increase the party damage, which is always useful. This one will dispel all buffs from one enemy, and that's unpredictable. If you're fighting 4 players, you have no idea who this one will fall on. Maybe he doesn't have any buffs. If your enemy doesn't have any buffs and you remove his buffs, well, that becomes useless. So I would say this is more unpredictable, but in a PvP situation with all the buffs and things we have in the game right now, again using Ares War as an example, where it's a guaranteed 1 versus 1 PvP battle, this might be interesting. The bottom armor breaker, whereas lashing out would be more versatile. That is more you can be more sure that is useful in any situation where you meet. Alright, so as I said, we'll go over the passives quickly. So we did that as well, and all the skills, and we are nearing 1 hour on the videos. I think that was pretty long already, and I hope I did a good discussion on the skills, helping you out to choose the skills for your character. So that's it, you guys, for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do click on like and subscribe if you enjoyed my video, and share it if you did. Also remember, you can go to my gaming portal dollygames.com to play games for free, and otherwise my Wartune blog is wartune.dollygames.com, so you can visit that and share that with your friends. Otherwise, feel free to put comments below the video or on my blog articles. I try to answer everybody. I don't always manage to answer everybody, but I try. So that's it, you guys. I'm already tired from making such a long video, but I hope it was useful. And if you have other opinions, or if you don't agree with whatever I discussed, it would be very useful for me and everybody if you share your argument. So don't just say you're wrong, for example, or I think no. Just explain or argue why you have a different opinion, and that way we can read and discuss and so forth, and learn from each other. So that's it, you guys. Thanks for watching, and have a very nice day.